Welcome into the Local Angle. I'm Brian Barrett from Off the Pike, and we have to start with the Celtics because Jaylen Brown is now the $300 million man, and what does this mean now long-term for Jaylen and the organization, right? So the reality is, until the Celtics win a championship, there's going to be this narrative, hey, do Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum fit together? Do they make each other better? And you may say, Brian, this is absolutely crazy. They've been to the finals together, and they've been living in the Eastern Conference Finals since they both came into the NBA. But we do understand why these questions come up, right? They play the same position, and they have similar skill sets. And you look at the team that just won the championship, the Nuggets. Yeah, they have the two-time MVP and the best player in the world right now, who just so happens to play center in Nikola Jokic. But they also have a guard that fits perfectly with him in Jamal Murray in their two-man game, right? They perfectly complement each other. Tatum and Brown, they've had a ton of success, but their games don't exactly fit like a glove. Now, Tatum is an elite player in the league, and Jaylen is an all-star level player. Things could be a lot worse, right? I'm not trying to make it sound like the Celtics have this big, huge problem. They've had a ton of success together, right? And it's just rare, though, to see in the NBA teams winning championships when their best two players have overlapping skill sets, right? So let's look at recent NBA champions and their best two players. So if we look at that Nuggets team I just mentioned, it's a center and a guard in Jokic and Murray. With the 2022 Warriors, Steph obviously was by far their best player, and you can pick their second best player. Now, it was probably Wiggins in the actual final series. He's a wing, not similar to Curry. Draymond probably overall that season, especially he was great defensively in the playoff run. He's a facilitator, a playmaker. He's not a guy that needs the ball to score. And even a guy like Klay Thompson, he's not really an on-ball guy, right? Where Klay Thompson, remember famously, he scored 60 points with 11 dribbles in a game. So Steph and Klay actually complement each other really well because when Klay is doing all this crazy off-the-ball stuff, Steph's doing his thing with the ball, right? So those guys fit together perfectly. Then you look at the 2021 Bucks. So Giannis is the best player, and he's a forward/big. And Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton, their second best player. Remember, Middleton that season was north of 41% on threes, and Holiday was at 6 assists per game. Giannis was at 20.8 points per game in the paint during that playoff run. That led the NBA. So basically, he operated inside, those guys operated outside, so they complemented each other perfectly. You go to the 2020 Lakers, who won in the bubble. They had LeBron, the greatest point forward in the history of the league, and they had Anthony Davis, who was a big. At that point, Anthony Davis actually had the best shooting stretch of his entire career. He's never regained that. But nonetheless, he was also the best defender in the postseason that year. And LeBron was really the maestro of the offense, right? LeBron was the on-ball guy. Davis was the finisher as a roller. And that year, he shot the ball well in that run to the NBA championship as well. So you had a guy that could pick and pop. You had a guy that could roll to play a perfect two-man game with LeBron. And defensively, Davis was so great. So those guys fit together really well. Then you look at the 19 Raptors. Kawhi, yes, you had Siakam at forward on that team, but their second best player was Lowry. Lowry averaged 15 points per game during the playoff run, 6.6 assists. And you had guys like Lowry and Van Fleet on that team that could sort of space the floor, right? Lowry took 6 threes a game. Van Fleet hit 38.8% of his threes during that run, and even Gasol took 3.7 threes per game and shot 38.2%. So yeah, Siakam likes to operate in similar areas of the floor, but he wasn't up the pecking order at that particular point in time. Like right now, he's the best player on the Raptors, but at that point, he really wasn't even the second best player, and that was more of an ensembled cast around Kawhi than having a definitive number two guy permanently. So those guys really fit well around Kawhi, and also they were all great defenders. Then you look at the 2018 Warriors, where you had Stefan Durant, the guard and the swingman, not overlapping skills whatsoever. This was basically having two of the best three players in the world at that time, along with LeBron, and it actually made Durant's life really easy, because Curry and Durant, they were so good together because you always had to be occupied by Curry, where Durant could score so easily. He's one of the best one-on-one scorers we've seen in the history of the sport. And now he's got Steph Curry in his team. It's almost like they broke the league. So those guys fit together really well. And the 2017 Warriors, we don't have to go through that because that's the same team. The 2016 Cavs, you had Kyrie and LeBron, the guard and the point forward. It was sort of reversed, right? Where LeBron, he still averaged 26.3 points per game in that run, but he also averaged 7.6 assists, where that was almost like, hey, LeBron's running the offense, and this when Kyrie was at his best, where Kyrie could just operate in isolation. So Kyrie was the scorer, the finisher, and LeBron scored a ton of points, but he was facilitating. Those guys fit really well together, the wing and the guard. 2015 Warriors, don't really have to go through that since we already mentioned it with the 2022 Warriors. The 14 Spurs, I would say at that point, Tony Parker was their best player. Postseason average 17.4 and 5 assists. And I know Kawhi won Finals MVP because of his defense, but he was not Kawhi yet, right? And whether you say it's Kawhi, Duncan, whatever it is, it's a point guard and a big and a swingman. So those skill sets, they really complement each other well. So we'll come back to 12 and 13 for a second here because that's the similarity to the Celtics. But 11 Mavs, Dirk and Jason Terry, a big and a guard, not overlapping skill sets. And in fact, they had a really good two-man game together. The 2010 Lakers, I hate to bring this up because it's the Lakers, but you had a guard and a big in Kobe and Gasol. Same thing with 09, of course. And then in 08, of course, you had a big in KG, and then you had a wing in Pierce, and you had another shooter in Ray Allen. But your two best players, the wing and the center, they don't overlap. So that's going through the last 15 years. The one team that has done it, where the two guys have overlapping skill sets, that's in 12 and 13 with LeBron and Wade. That's the most similar example to the Celtics group, and it's really the only example in recent history. So we've seen this happen. Guys with overlapping skill sets win championships together. Just 2 of the last 15 title teams, right? So that means 13 of the last 15 have won with guys with complementary skills, a big and a guard, or a wing and a guard, right? So how do the Celtics replicate what the Heat did? So now that Jaylen is this $300 million man, it's on him. So the overlapping skill set thing has been okay, and more than okay with both those guys on the court together, right? So if you look at the numbers last season, Tatum and Jaylen on the court together, 120.2 offensive rating. And remember, the Kings led the NBA this past season with a 118.6 rating. So the Celtics are basically, with those two guys on the court, they're better than the league's best offense. So it works when they're on the court together. They also had a plus 5.7 net rating, which means they outscored teams by 5.7 points per 100 possessions. So that's really good, but it would have been second in the league behind who? The Celtics at plus 6.7. So wait. How can that be true if Jaylen and Tatum are your two best players? Well, getting back to this whole thing of complementing each other. So if you look at when Tatum played without Jaylen, the Celtics had a 122 offensive rating, okay, and a plus 12 net rating. So think about that. The Celtics with Tatum and no Jaylen were 6.3 points per 100 possessions better with Tatum and Jaylen on the court together. So more than doubled. And that 5.3 points per 100 better than the league's best net rating. That's how good it was with Tatum and not Jaylen Brown. So what about Jaylen without Tatum? Okay, this is where it gets interesting and kind of concerning. A 113.7 offensive rating. That would have ranked 24th in the league. And so you go from the best offense in the league with just Tatum to the 23rd offense with just Jaylen. Together, you're still the league's best offense. So they can play together. They can play with just Tatum on the court, but they can't play with just Jaylen on the court to a high level of success. So the conclusion is Jaylen, of course, needs to be better, leading that second unit, if you will, or leading a different group of players. And here's the thing. I just don't think that Jaylen is capable of doing that without a lot of help. We know the ball doesn't move the same with Jaylen on the court compared to off the court. We've given you just the offensive rating, and the impact numbers are actually bad with Jaylen. They get better when he's off the court. And we know Jaylen, he has his dribbling issues, right? But he's also not a good passer. We always look at the turnovers and stress on that, but he's really not a good passer. If you look at this past season, he had a 1.18 assist to turnover ratio. Of players listed as guards, because Jaylen was last year, that had played at least 30 minutes per game, only Kelly Oubre and DeAndre Hunter were worse in terms of their assist to turnover ratio. So Jaylen's really bad when it comes to that. So the point of this is Jaylen is never going to be the hub of the offense like Tatum can be. He's not a creator. So you're paying him $300 million to be a play finisher, essentially. So that type of player doesn't scream supermax. But the Celts, they didn't have a choice. What are they going to do? Trade him to another team and not give him a supermax? When he's a rental, it just doesn't make any sense. So you had no leverage. And secondarily, yes, Jaylen is limited as a player, but he does a lot of things well. He averaged 26.6 points per game, which was 9th in the NBA. So I'm not trying to be very critical of Jaylen. I'm just saying he has his weaknesses, but he's still a really, really good player. So how do you fix these non-Tatum minutes now that you're paying Jaylen all this money? You would think the answer is he's just got to fill it up. The problem is I don't think you can be successful with Jaylen by himself sort of leading the second unit. So my answer is I would have Tatum lead the bench mob. Tatum plays well with everyone. Jaylen needs help. So give Tatum the rest early and keep Jaylen on the court with your third and fourth best players in Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis. What Jaylen needs is he needs a playmaker in Derek White. And if you look at Jaylen and White on the court together last year, a plus 10.2 net rating and a 119.8 offensive rating. White can be sort of the table setter for that group. And then Porzingis can give Jaylen a guy to run the pick and roll with, and he can space the floor 38%, as we said, or north of 38% from deep last season, which opens up the lane for Jaylen, and maybe he'll turn the ball over less because he'll have more space to operate with, right? So you keep your third and your fourth best player on the floor with Jaylen to make life easier for him. And with Tatum, it doesn't really matter. If you look at Tatum, all these guys that he played with last year, Tatum and Al, 120.1 offensive rating, better than the league's best. Tatum and Brogdon together, 116.4 offensive rating, that would have been 6, so still really good. Tatum and Hauser, 117.2, third best it would have been in the league. Tatum and Rob, 120.8, better than the league's best. Rob Williams, of course, I'm alluding to there. So he basically plays at an elite level with anyone, and he loves playing with Rob. So I would just rely on Tatum with the bench mob and keep the other top players like Derek White and like Kristaps Porzingis paired together with Jaylen Brown to make his life easier. And I think Porzingis could be great for Jaylen just in terms of that spacing and whatnot. And big picture, Tatum is the far superior player and more impactful, as evident by all the stuff I just laid out. So it may seem like Jaylen is here forever now that he just signed for $304 million, but essentially you now have this window where you have to win in the near future because they've now had 2 years where they're basically the main pieces. They haven't won a championship. If we get into this thing and we're 5 years into it and Jaylen's getting paid all this money and the Celtics haven't won a championship yet, they're not trading Jason Tatum. They'll be trading Jaylen Brown away. So I hope it all works out for these guys. And that's my suggestion for how it can work out this year. But now the pressure really is on Jaylen to win a championship and prove these guys can fit together. All right, a lot more coming up on the local angle. You'll hear from the guys from the Philly Special, my buddy John Jastremski from New York, and Jason Goff with the Full Go.
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago and the guy was like, you're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago. I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, Building the Next Era of the Internet, a new book from entrepreneur and startup investor Chris Dixon. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what it's like to be part of a community of fans. You value the people who play, perform, and create for everyone. Well, what if there are more ways to support them, more ways to be a fan? And what if you had even more ways to connect with the teams, artists, and other creators that you love? Even though creators make the internet valuable, how much value do they get for their work? Well, that's mostly up to a few big tech companies. Shouldn't creators get more from the platforms they make successful? More value, but also more say, more control, more ownership? Read, Write, Own explores an alternative future for the internet, one that reclaims control for creators, fans, listeners, and gamers, the people who not only use the internet, but make it useful. Read, Write, Own imagines an internet built by us for us. So order your copy of the book today or learn more at readwriteown.com.
Welcome to the Ringers Philly Special, and to those of you watching on FanDuel TV, I'm Sheil Kapadia today, joined by my friend, return guest, EJ Smith of the Inquirer. We have a fun show for you today. We're going to talk Eagles training camp, EJ and I, for the first segment. And then in the second segment, I'm going to fire off some Phillies thoughts to ace producer Cliff Augustin. Get those off my chest. They were boiling up during my vacation. I got to have some outlet to have people hear what I have to say about the Phillies after that series against the Baltimore Orioles. But let's welcome in. I mean, you three-time return guest, EJ. You're going to start not returning my texts and phone calls pretty soon.
No, I mean, I must be doing something right. I'm always honored when I get the Sheil Kapadia text. I apologize because, pull people behind the curtain. The last text you sent me, I had to turn you down on golf, and I was really broken up about that. So I'm glad I can make it up a little bit by being here. Like I said, thanks for having me.
There you go. We'll make up for golf in like 10 months when it's the next time we get a break here. But Eagles, first training camp practice today. Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman opening up with the press conference. Before we get to whatever newsy items we have, I want to know, like, what training camp is this for EJ? What tricks have you learned? Like, what are you wearing for like the heat? How are you staying hydrated? I mean, how did you feel? It's sort of like a back to school type feel. I remember always the first day of training camp.
Yeah, it is really like a back to school vibe, like I have my little polo set out. Like my wife works night shifts, and she was like, "Send me your back to work outfit." I was like, "No, like we're not doing that." I'd say so. This is training camp number 5 for me.
Wow.
And I'm still the youngest on the beat. I'm pretty sure at the very least I'm still the youngest.
Nice flex. Okay, I like that.
I have learned a couple of tricks of the trade. Not to get too much into the nonsense, right off the bat, but I've learned the tricks. It's mostly towel related. We used to call it the Damo towel.
Yes.
Paul Domowich, my former colleague, used to always bring like a little 2-foot towel, like a hotel type towel, to practice so he could wipe his sweat, make sure he didn't sweat through his shirt. That's a pro move. I'm going to break that out this training camp. And then the other second towel-related tip that I've learned over my time is you're taking a lot of showers during camp. You got the shower before you go, and you got the shower when you go home. So you need 2 towels in the rotation. I'm not usually a 2-towel guy, but during camp, you got to break out the second towel.
I mean, you came in firing all cylinders. This guy's ready for December. The Damo towel is absolutely the best training camp tip. And I don't know that I've ever done it, but every summer when I go to practices, I should have done the Damo towel, because he would often have it around his neck, which I don't know about you, but my neck is like the part of my body that gets the hottest, and the sun's just, beaming down on my neck. And so he would cover the neck. And then, you also have it to kind of wipe the face if the arms are getting sweaty, whatever, you have it to use there as well. So you're already, wise beyond your years. That's something I need to start implementing this summer as well. All right. Let's get to some of the newsy stuff. I mean, I don't think there's much news on this angle, but I have to just the big question on the first day of training camp is like, who's there? Who's practicing? Who's not practicing? Is anyone holding out? Is anyone holding in? It seemed relatively drama-free for the Eagles, but fill us in on that aspect of it.
Yeah, I wrote a weird story today, which was basically the story today was that there was not a huge story. Like, the injury list today, the guys who weren't practicing, Hassan Reddick was the only major player that wasn't at practice. No offense to Devin Allen, who was on the non-football injury list with a calf injury. But there, when I first started on the beat, there was always something at the beginning of camp, whether it was Carson Wentz or, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Brooks. There were always guys who had lingering injuries, surgery recoveries that hadn't been finished by the time that training camp started. This year, all the guys who had surgery came back healthy. Again, Hassan Reddick has groin stiffness. The word from the team is they expect him back early next week. There's really not a lot of, major injury concerns. There's no major contract concerns. The Eagles got the Jalen Hurts extension done before all these other big quarterback extensions came in. So yeah, it's kind of an anticlimactic thing to start camp. Howie Roseman talked today, and it's like, man, we don't have a ton of questions for Howie today. Usually it's like we're all shouting over each other. Today it was a little bit more chill because, there's not a lot of pressing news. Obviously there's a lot of time for things to come up, but for the start of camp, I think the Eagles are in a really good spot.
I mean, I don't want to go crazy with practice observations. It's one day, one practice, but why don't we start on offense? Was there, was there anything that stood out? Was there a play? Was there a player? Was there a depth chart thing? Anything you saw that the listeners should know about?
Yeah, so I'm calling these my initial observations because, that's all they really are, and, I don't want to sit here and say every single time, well, it's only been one practice. So it's really just your first impressions of the team so far. On offense, I think the biggest thing that I noticed today was how much DeAndre Swift was catching the ball out of the backfield. Now, I wouldn't say that those were particularly productive plays with him. I think that there was it was generally a sloppy day for the offense. There wasn't a lot of a standout plays or standout performances. But DeAndre Swift out of the backfield as a passing target was definitely one of the headlines from today, in my opinion. There just seemed to be a real emphasis. The Eagles were rotating the backs, Boston Scott, Trey Sermon were getting reps with the ones. DeAndre Swift was in with the threes at one point. And Nick Sirianni said before practice, those guys are just going to rotate. Don't read too much into it. And it kind of played out that way where it's like, wait a minute, why are these guys going in this order? But whenever DeAndre Swift was out there, he was seemingly the target of a lot of passes. And the other thing that I did notice, it's funny, the ebbs and flows of practice for a young player. Tyree Jackson's going through routes at the beginning of practice, and he kind of does this outbreaking route that's he just at the top of his route, he literally didn't do anything. He just kind of just rounded it off. And Jason Michael, went right up to him and yelled at him, I need something at the top. This is the first 5 minutes of practice.
Yeah.
And then he went on to have a really nice day. He had a leaping catch in the back of the end zone. He had a couple of nice catches, outside of that too. He was just a guy who I wrote a lot in my notes here. I just remember writing his name down a couple of times. So yeah, Tyree Jackson, I think that he's the type of player that has flashed in camp before. I think it's more about staying healthy and getting more reps at tight end after, playing quarterback in college. But yeah, those are the two offensive standouts. I know it's kind of not AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, but those were two guys that stood out to me today.
I mean, I think that's good. I always felt like I'm not going to learn much about Jalen Hurts could have the worst training camp we've ever seen, and does it really matter? Honestly, you saw, when you see what a guy can do in the regular season, in the playoffs, AJ Brown too. Literally all you want is for AJ Brown to be healthy. Now, last year it was different because it was all right, first time on the team. What's his chemistry like with Jalen Hurts? But those guys, there's almost I know you still write about them and include them in the observations, and maybe there's a wrinkle or something you notice that's different than last year, but there's only so much you can say there. With the running backs, so DeAndre Swift, I was just looking, I think he's had over 350 receiving yards in each of his seasons. He's averaged around 7.7 yards per reception, which is, so I would say slightly above average, pretty good for a running back. In terms of the whole rotation, I think it was the first question Sirianni got today, right? Was about the running backs. Solak and I talked about it a little bit on the last episode. Where do you come down on just basically who's going to lead the running backs in carries or touches when week 18 is over? Do you have a strong opinion on that? I'm sure that's a popular topic of discussion on the sidelines, or will be in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, and it's really polarizing too. And I get it. It's we don't really know yet. But honestly, I think the fact that the team really started to turn to Kenny Gainwell when the games got more and more important, by the time that the Super Bowl rolled around, he was such a big part of the running game and the offense in general. And I think that when he got drafted, I think he was cast as the Nyheim Hines type player, the gadget guy who could be out in the slot and really affect the passing game. And he's kind of evolved into something completely different than that. He's actually I've always thought that he's really good in short yardage situations around the goal line. He seems to have good vision. Honestly, if I had to pick which running back, you say carries, leads the team.
Yeah, let's say carries.
I would say Kenny Gainwell. I think that there's a real chance for Rashad Penny to make an impact, but and I heard that you guys say this on the last pod. I think he's going to be a limited touches until they really need him to kind of turn it up type of guy. And I think that DeAndre Swift can have a role. I actually think that he might be that Nyheim Hines role. that guy who can affect the passing game and kind of be deployed in different places. I don't see him as a workhorse type back. I mean, Detroit didn't use him that way. And I think that he's kind of a little bit more of the gadget guy. So it's weird because they've got such a strange mix of running backs. They have a bunch of guys who don't really fit that prototypical, featured back archetype. But yeah, I would probably put Kenny Gainwell in as a leader now. Now we'll see. I think Camp's going to give us a lot of information on, who gets the key reps and, who looks the best. But yeah, right now, if you ask me through one day, I would still say Kenny Gainwell, even though like I mentioned earlier, you saw a lot of DeAndre Swift kind of as the main pass target when he was in there.
All right, I have to make sure Solak doesn't listen to this episode or he's going to be chirping that, see, EJ boots on the ground is backing up his opinion of Kenny Gainwell. You are absolutely right. We mentioned it on the last episode just about the style of Gainwell. I mean, he's been one of the most efficient runners in the NFL over the last 2 years on a small sample, and he hasn't really been a big play threat. I think I said one carry of over 20 plus yards in like 121 attempts or something like that. So, it could play out that way. I'm still hanging on DeAndre Swift has done it a little bit more, but we'll see how that plays out. And I think it'll be close regardless. I don't think one guy's going to run away with it or anything like that. Thanks to EJ Smith of the Inquirer for joining us on the Local Angle. Remember, you can listen to the Philly special on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
What episode are we? This is episode 270 of the Full Go Podcast. Is that what we're working with on this fine Tuesday evening? Welcome into episode 270 of the Full Go Podcast right here. I'm Jason Goff. And of course, this thing is brought to you by The Ringer and Spotify is the gang. Shout out to FanDuel TV, the Local Angle. Mwah, we love you. Every single Friday, you can check us out here on the Local Angle. And of course, every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, you can check out the Full Go wherever you get your pods, but most importantly, right here on Spotify. So, as we're sitting here, Kyle Williams, the exceptional one, of course, my main man, Tony Gill, and the Chief Vibes Officer, Chris Sutton. We have just taken in Cubs Sox game 1 of the Crosstown series, right? All the excitement going about the city, and it's as if you got 2 Beyonce concerts in one stadium at Guaranteed Rate Field, huh? Or not. It was as if you had 17,000 people in 87-degree heat watching the White Sox hit their ass kicked by Dansby Swanson. That's all that just happened. I sat here and was looking forward to talking to y'all, the people who aren't privy to the whole Chicago thing. Shout out to the Philly peeps. Shout out to the Boston peeps. Shout out to the New York peeps with John Jastremski and the gang. I was getting ready to, ingratiate everybody, Tony and Kyle. I was getting ready to make sure everybody understood what the Crosstown Classic felt like. Cause for years, the Crosstown Classic has been, kind of my lightweight guilty pleasure, my jam. Like, I'm not one of these Sox fans who hates Cubs fans, right? Or hates the Cubs. That's not really my game. Like, y'all can have all that. Y'all can have a bickering and arguing between 2 moribund franchises who have won, 2 titles in the last 100 some odd years. Like, I'm not about that game, right? Like, I'm not about to play who has played the better nail to everybody else's sledgehammer in baseball. I'm not going to play that game with y'all, especially not locally. So every single year for the last, I don't know how many years, I've tried to go to this series with my uncle, who is also a Sox fan and a member of Chicago Police Department, Chicago's finest for 20 some odd years. He went out there with his old partner tonight, and I was like, hey man, take care, have a good time, enjoy the game. Last time we went out was the Eloy Jimenez game. It was the last time Eloy Jimenez hit a home run where I was like, damn it, this is why you're here. All the other home runs and all the other hot streaks and all the other weeks where he's been hot and then gets a groin injury and is out for a week or 2 weeks, or runs into a fence and is out for a month. Like, the ups and downs, let me tell you, Eloy hitting that home run a few years back, was it 2019? Boy, I still, a single tear comes down my eye when I think of that, because that wasn't what happened tonight at Guaranteed Rate Field. And I'll say this, man, Lance Lynn, if he is the older version of what Michael Kopech is going through, you can watch it right there for your face. You get back-to-back home runs for Dansby Swanson and Christopher Morel. Next thing you know, Dansby Swanson comes up, takes another one out the yard. And okay, you're throwing the throwing error by Tim Anderson, just, as the cherry on top, right? Like, everything that the White Sox have kind of been all year long, they were tonight. And that's as simple as that. And as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline, which when this thing comes out, what we're talking about is Michael Kopech, the number one, because Lance Lynn has been moved on. Is Kyle Hendricks still a part of the Cubs starting staff? Pitched a phenomenal game. Although, bottom of the 7th, we know what happened, right? Yohan Moncada goes deep. Bases are loaded. It's a 7-1 ball game. You figure this home run can get you right back into the swing of things. The Sox bats have been a little bit more loud coming off the All-Star break. But no, Seiya Suzuki robs the home run right at the fence. The game stays 7-1. The Sox tack on a couple of more runs. Like this, it's a monstrosity of a season. And Michael Kopech has just done what Lance Lynn has done this year, which is when he doesn't have the velocity on that fastball, when you ain't throwing that thing 99, 98, like we're used to seeing, when that thing is around 96, 95 and as straight as a string in the zone, you're going to get lifted. And that's what happened. He got lifted. The launch angle got the best of him. His stuff isn't as overpowering in some starts as it is in others. His consistency has been an issue. And also his pitch efficiency has been an issue. I mean, the long at bats where you're getting, that second time through the order, it's as if it's the third time because of how many pitches you've seen from top to bottom. And the Cubs bats have been hot post All-Star break. I mean, Cody Bellinger has been on smash. Ian Happ has found his stroke again. Of course, Dansby Swanson has come back. And this is another little suggestion in the suggestion box for David Ross. Hey, Mike Tauchman no longer needs to bat leadoff. That whole thing can, Dansby is back now. You could go ahead and throw him back up there at the top of the lineup, wherever you want to slot him in, right? If you want to, put a jump start in that thing, you put him in the number one hole, put Nico Horner, who all he does is make plays, made more plays in game one of the Sox Cubs Crosstown Classic. It's the first time since 1901, by the way, that the Cubs have had 4+ home runs and 5 stolen bases in a game. That happened against the White Sox. The first time in 122 years that the Cubs did something, and it just happened to happen in the first game of the White Sox Cubs series. I'll say this, Yasmani Grandal should be embarrassed. They ran early and often on him and weren't even waiting for first move. Weren't waiting to be looked back. It wasn't a rhythm thing. Like, we got to start treating this thing like we treat every other free agent signing that really doesn't fit the bill. And whether it be a linebacker or a point guard or a catcher behind the plate, and hey, love him, seems like a nice enough guy, hasn't really been valued the way that money says he should be valued. He hasn't been productive. And especially behind the plate, you thought this guy was going to be the framer of pitches, the controller of a staff, and the guy who is going to execute your defense against the running game. Well, didn't happen tonight. Nico Horner had 2 stolen bases tonight. He did everything he wanted to do. So, hey, man, if you're a Cubs fan, you're sitting pretty right now. You're hoping that they can, beat the hell out of these sorry-ass teams that they've been playing post-All-Star break, like the Cardinals, like the Nationals, like the White Sox, and maybe, just maybe, convince Jed Hoyer to not move Kyle Hendricks, to not move Marcus Stroman. Cody Bellinger has a 1,000-plus OPS. He's doing something crazy like 144 in the weighted runs created plus category in the month of July. Like, he's been outstanding, and he's playing a Gold Glove caliber center field. So if they can string some more wins together and make Jed Hoyer think or believe that they are in this wild card hunt, or what are they, 3.5 games, 4 games out as we sit here on a Tuesday night, I'm not mad at it. Because I don't want to see those dudes leave for Cubs fans. I don't want to see Cody Bellinger go to the Twins and, then he kicks the shit out of the rest of the AL Central for the rest of the season and then maybe enjoys his time. Next thing you know, he's a Minnesota Twin the same way that Carlos Correa became one. Whereas, like, all right, we'll see. Well, a little bit of a flyer here. Next thing you know, they're extending him. Like, you got to be very careful, guys. Go to different atmospheres and get a taste of some winning or important baseball and fall in love for, a 2-month rental. Unless you got the wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of nod, understood handshake, gentleman's agreement that you're coming back here. But Cody Bellinger is the kind of guy that you're trying to add if you're the Cubs and Cubs fans. Marcus Stroman is the kind of guy that you're trying to add in an offseason if you're the Cubs. So the fact that they've played so well, pitched so well, and hit so well, now that they, been put themselves in a position where they are trade bait, it's quite the conundrum. But you don't have to worry about that when the Sox are in town, boy. I tell you, dinner and a movie. That's all. And you might not even have to go out to dinner. You feel me? Just throw some on Netflix real quick. Sox will come over and chill out. They got the furry balls on the back of the socks. You know what I'm talking about back in the day, fellas. You know what it was when you saw the The little, the little cotton ball on the back of the sock. You know what time it was when you pull up in that bonnet. Yeah, straight to the action. That's what the Sox are from here on out, y'all. They are the straight to the action boys. Okay, you want to air? Right there for you, served up, hot and ready, like a $5 holler. You want to run into an out at third base when you're down by 1 run? I can't wait to. I'm a Chicago White Sox. This is what I do. You want to be wild in the zone as if you're still throwing 100 miles an hour and 99 miles an hour? Here it is, served up on a platter. How do you want it? Just a little bubble gum afterwards. That's all I asked for. That's what the White Sox have been. They are 20 games under 500, y'all. 20. This is a team that was supposed to contend not only for the AL Central title, but was going to show us that they were not what they were last year. Blame it on the old man, right? Blame it on Tony La Russa. It was his fault. He's falling asleep in the dugout, got sick at the end, and we didn't really have our mojo. Bring in somebody from Kansas City who was a part of the ass whoopings that we took last year and said, hey, those ass whoopings will no longer be happening because I'm at the helm. And guess what happened? They looked him right in the face, said, hey, for your first managerial job, we are going to be the least productive team in the first half in terms of just entirety of baseball, right? Whether it be hitting, base running, fielding, staying healthy. Like, what did the Sox do well pre-All-Star break that made you think post-All-Star break this shit was going to get back on track? Nothing for me. So as I sit back and get ready for game 2 and just think about, should I care or not? Of course I'm going to care because I like y'all and we hang out together on this podcast. But other than that, man, I'm not surprised by the outcome. The Cubs did what they were supposed to do against a soft schedule, post-All-Star break. The Sox are part of that soft schedule. And I'm just happy that the Cubs actually came out and beat the White Sox. Usually the White Sox play this game with you where they mess around and tease you and then they beat themselves. No. Fresh out the box. The Cubs like, no. We got this, fellas. We'll beat you. and the Sox were just sitting there with their chili willy. Just, that's nice. More butter. More syrup. Yes. More stolen bases. That's nice. more letter high fastballs at 93 miles an hour that big leaguers can turn around. Oh yeah. Bring that on. The Chili Willy White Sox, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy. That's been the local angle. As you can see, everything is happy and good here in the city of Chicago, in the summer of concerts and the summer of movies. Everybody wants to go see Oppenheimer. Everybody wants to go see Barbie. We'll talk about they cloned Tyrone later on in the pod. I'm just sitting here with White Sox baseball.
Welcome back to the local angle right here on FanDuel TV. I'm John Jastremski, the host of New York, New York, where it's fair to say we are gearing up for what will be, hands down and no questions asked, the most highly anticipated New York football season that we have had collectively in a decade. And I understand the bar right now is set super low from a New York football perspective. Changed a little bit with the New York Giants going to the playoffs last year, winning a playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings. But for the other team in town that is getting ready for their appearance on Hard Knocks, that is all in with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, this has got to be without question the most jazzed up the Jet fan base has been in over a decade. Ironically enough, since the last time they were on Hard Knocks. And you know what happens when you're on Hard Knocks? You're in the crosshairs. You're under that microscope. The Jets found themselves Thursday a little bit of controversy because of their former offensive coordinator, or their current, edit that out, their current offensive coordinator, who was the former head coach of the Denver Broncos, that basically got roasted to the high heavens, where Sean Payton goes scorched earth in discussing and dissecting the job performance that he gave you a year ago as head coach of the Denver Broncos. Look, we could all agree that Daniel Hackett was inept as an NFL head coach. That's obvious. But it's very rare that you see a coach in the coaching fraternity go and roast a fellow coach the way Sean Payton did, where he was basically taking no prisoners and taking shots at everybody in Denver for what went on with their operation. If I'm a Jet fan, I'm not concerned about it. Nathaniel Hackett's back calling plays. He is no longer an NFL head coach. He's an offensive coordinator. He's got the rapport. He's got the comfort level with Aaron Rodgers. You can roast him as a head coach all you want. I need him to be a quality, competent offensive coordinator, which he has shown he can be with this particular quarterback. But where the Bronco Jet hostility takes it almost to another level is Sean Payton taking a shot at the quote-unquote super teams, which we have seen fail in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles being the perfect example of that. But my counter to Coach Payton, who's looking at the Jets as a super team? They made one significant move this offseason. That's going and getting Aaron Rodgers. And I get it. Aaron Rodgers, star quarterback, future Hall of Famer, MVP a couple of years ago. Like, we know what kind of brand Rodgers brings to the New York Jets. That's obvious. That goes without saying. But it's not like you had the Jets spending like drunken sailors this offseason. Let's be honest. They basically just brought in all Aaron Rodgers' buddies. That's how they drew up this offseason, which is fine. Is it possible, though, that they go and get themselves not a buddy of Aaron Rodgers, but a former foe of Aaron Rodgers? It sure seems like the Dalvin Cook to the New York Jets rumors are picking up a whole lot of steam. And I thought all along Dalvin Cook was going to find himself down in South Florida. Remember, he played his college football at Florida State. He's a Miami boy through and through. His buddy Jalen Ramsey just ended up with the Miami Dolphins, and there's no state income tax in Florida. So you're signing a free agent deal. There are a lot of appealing reasons for why you would want to be in South Beach, aside from the weather, when it comes to maybe making your next pit stop in the NFL. But here we are. Dalvin Cook has not signed with the Miami Dolphins. He is meeting with the New York Jets, and the Jets have a little extra cap room. They restructure the contract of Aaron Rodgers. And if I'm the Jets, you do not let Dalvin Cook leave the building. Yes, you have Breece Hall. We all love Breece Hall's game. Breece Lightning, speedy, guy who was breaking off 70 and 80-yard runs last year. But we are also talking about a running back who blew out his ACL. And there's always that question of, how are you going to respond after the injury? Are you going to be better than ever immediately in year one? Saquon Barkley took him a year to kind of find his footing, to get him back into that comfort zone and whatnot. So having somebody like Dalvin Cook to pair with Breece Hall makes perfect sense in Jetland. And you don't want to be in a position where you wine and dine and you flirt with Dalvin Cook, and then all of a sudden he's leaving the building, and then the Miami Dolphins come calling or somebody else comes a calling, and you don't end up getting your guy. You got the cap room now to do it. Don't let Dalvin Cook leave the building if you're the New York Jets. You're all in on this year. You want to go and stick it to Sean Payton and the Broncos? You want to be able to show up in these marquee games right out of the gate? Go and add Dalvin Cook to that running back room. Put him with Aaron Rodgers. Put him with Garrett Wilson. Put him with Breece Hall. And those plus 250 odds for the Jets to win a division, wonder if they go down a little bit. And the AFC East, you want to talk about one of the more fascinating divisions to break down. It's the best division in the NFL. You can make a compelling case, and the odds on FanDuel indicate as such that the Bills, the Jets, and the Miami Dolphins all could find themselves right there as far as winning this division. You could make a case for any of those three teams to go and get it done. And when the fourth team from an odds perspective is the New England Patriots, we're still talking about Bill Belichick. They may be the least talented team in the division, but we are still talking about Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. So you got to pay homage and pay respect to the best coach to ever do it. So, Jetland, you got your coach sticking up your offensive coordinator. You got the Dalvin Cook pursuit. And there is a lot chewing as we get closer and closer to this regular season. I told Giant fans there was no reason to worry, and there was no reason to sound the alarm on Saquon Barkley. And look, I could go into a diatribe about everything that is wrong with the financial system that's in place. The way running backs are not treated fairly from a standpoint of their best years being under that rookie contract. And it's tough to justify, if you're a front office, the idea of a significant long-term guarantee as far as money and years for a back with the way these guys just break down. That's almost a conversation for a different day. But Giant fans were worried about a holdout a week ago with Barkley. Monday, they give him a couple extra bucks guaranteed. He ends up signing the 1-year deal. And Saquon Barkley, ready to go, started the 2023 season. Why? Saquon Barkley's a people pleaser. He's a team-first guy. He's a likable guy. And I don't think he wanted the label, fair or unfair, that he was being a diva or that he was being a guy that was kind of going to upend what the 2023 New York Giants are trying to do, which is get back to the postseason for the first time since 2007, 2008 in consecutive years. I don't think Saquon wanted that attached to him. Do I think he's ticked off? Yeah, I do. Do I think he's annoyed about the fact that he's not sitting here with a long-term contract for the Giants? I'd be upset too. But this is about the system. This is not about the player. And if you're a Giant fan, you should be thrilled with the way your front office just handled their offseason. Because what they did is they showed you, we understand and we get the economics and the dynamics of a front office in 2023 and how it needs to be run and how it needs to be operated. There are a lot of front offices around the National Football League in years past, and the Giants had one with Dave Gettleman just a few years ago, that did not understand that sort of structure. You got to be forward-thinking now running a team. You pay quarterbacks, you pay corners, you pay offensive tackles. You don't give long-term contracts to running backs, even if they're as dynamic and even if they're as special as Saquon Barkley. You feel for Saquon? Well, it's the system. It's not the Giants. It's the position that he plays. And that's why he'll be on that 1-year contract, and he'll have to prove it once again, hey, that I'm one of the best in the business in 2023. Now, speaking about one of the best in the business, the last 8 weeks, the New York Yankees, the baseball team in town that is the love of my life, they have been not exactly easy on the eyes. I think that's putting it mildly, with their inability to score runs, with their inability to win games consistently. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. Aaron Judge, not much time to go in rehab, coming back after the injury at Dodger Stadium. Yankees get ready for a monstrous 3-game series against the Baltimore Orioles, and the Yankees get set for a make-or-break part of their schedule that's going to define, I think, what they will look like the rest of the year in 2023 against the Orioles, and the Tampa Bay Rays, and then the reigning World Series champion Houston Astros. And as they kind of figure out what their plan is going to be for the August 1st trade deadline, they need Aaron Judge more than ever. Is he ready to go? Is he ready to go and be one of the best players in baseball and just find that timing, find that rhythm, and all of a sudden pick up right where he left off? That's $1 million question for the Yankees. But I think their way of looking at things is look at our offense and look at our team without this guy. We'll take our chances of him finding his timing in the big leagues, in the biggest games of the year, as opposed to running out the likes of Jake Bowers and Billy McKinney and the quadruple A players the Yankees have had in their lineup. Very rare that you see in Major League Baseball a player have the impact. One individual, like Aaron Judge. You know, that's usually reserved for the NBA with a Jokic or a Giannis or Curry. That's the presence of Aaron Judge. Look at the Yankee record and look at their performance offensively when he plays and when he doesn't play. But the Yankee hope of getting back into the playoffs, you hate to put it on one guy, but guess what? I'm putting it on one guy. Aaron Judge, you got to take him there. Will he be able to do so? Buckle up. That's a rather intriguing storyline in town. So things really heating up in a big way around the Big Apple. It's always hot and steamy in late July around the Big Apple. But two intriguing football teams, the return of one of the best players in all of baseball. Get your popcorn ready. New York, New York, on the Ringer, on the local angle here on FanDuel TV. We'll come right back.